So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invite to talk about evolution. Evolution is a huge thing in my field of work. I hear it all the time. Maybe you, to some degree, are influenced by it. I would say you're heavily influenced by it, even if you don't realize it. But today's talk is evolution and encounter with faith. You don't often hear the word faith and evolution in the same sentence. I'm going to show you how the evolutionist indeed brings a great deal of faith to the table with their belief system. And today we're going to just focus on how do you even create life? So really it's not even about evolution yet, because evolution is about life changing. It doesn't explain how life started, but you got to start life right to have any kind of belief system. So we're going to talk about that. And uh, first of all, let me introduce my friends. These are the guys that I work with, the bacteria. My job is I develop fermentation systems. Well, what does that mean? What can bacteria do? Well, they can do to me, about anything. I've made pharmaceuticals, natural pesticides, vaccines, basic chemicals, enzymes, even selling bacteria as probiotics. People are eating more of it now. They're actually paying money to eat bacteria, which I appreciate. Thank you. So what do I do? Really, I take raw materials like sugars and phosphates and nitrogen sources, throw them in a big fermenter or a little fermenter, inoculate it with a small amount of bugs. I call them bugs. Uh, and this could be a 1 liter scale, 3 mils up to many hundred thousands of liters of fermenters volume, giant fermenters to make this stuff. That's kind of what I do. And who am I professionally? Why am I talking about this? I think that my background has pushed me towards this for sure. Way back in '92, I got my PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Madison, Wisconsin. Go Badgers! And I was just a Tennessee boy out of the hills. Got to go to a really good school up in the tundra of Wisconsin. And later on, I became the director of fermentation at Wyeth, which Pfizer later bought. Big thing that we worked on was a vaccine called Prevnar 13. All the babies in the free world get this vaccine. Most complicated vaccine ever made. Very successful, over $3 billion per year in sales. It fights pneumococcal bacterial infections. And all the babies get it. People over 65 can get it for free. I wish I could get it. It's a really good thing. It won't be that long. Fermentation lab manager later for Dow Chemical. Got some good awards for that. Then Eastman called me up, and I led their fermentation and genetic engineering group. We redesigned a bacterium that made butanol from sugarcane. We used the sugar out of cane squeezins. And later went on to Proterra as the VP of engineering there. We designed a system to turn CO2, carbon dioxide, into sugar. And here we are in Orlando with our fermenters. These are plastic hot dog looking things, giant things, basically designed to get sunlight to our algae so they can turn the CO2 into sugar. Really cool thing. It got a award from Biofuels Digest for that. And currently I'm a senior staff fermentation scientist locally, making probiotics now. And one of the fun things I get to do is go around to different national associations and teach on fermentations, either basics or advanced classes, and how to do fermentation. But had a big challenge back at Wisconsin going to grad school back in '88 in bacteriology. I'll never forget this day. It's seared in my brain. Professor offered up some free knowledge to us. He said, you know what? There are actually some people out there who still believe the Bible's true. In the class, you could hear the chuckles go through the class, and he essentially was saying, evolution is a scientific fact, and the Bible is a pure fairy tale of events completely disproven by science. And I sat there shaking. I was one of those Bible-believing Christians, and I had no idea what the scientific evidence was for evolution, for or against. And then after some reflection later on, it dawned on me. I was actually afraid to look at the evidence. Worse yet, I realized I intentionally did not go look because, hey, what if it was true? What if it made me rethink everything I believed in? And it dawned on me, anyone, Christian, Muslim, even atheist, if you ask them to change their religion, you're asking a lot. And we run from things like that. Doesn't matter, shaking your belief system is a crazy thing. Okay, but before we get into this, you have to understand evolution and what it really says and what it doesn't say to really appreciate what we're talking about here. So evolution goes back to some small tiny dot of all the mass in the universe, and all of a sudden it went bang. You've heard about the Big Bang. And later on, that was about 14 billion years ago, we're told. And then about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth started to form, and then somehow life began, somehow. And then once it did begin, it began to evolve and get more complex. It went from simple, and through, this is the key thing, it's random. It's random. There's nobody at the helm here. And went into, and somehow got more complex by purely random processes. Mutations were the driving force. That's true today. Mutations happen. Natural selection steps in and picks the best ones. That does really happen. But in evolution, the theory is that can lead to complex things. And the implication is death reigned supreme from the beginning of the Earth, from the first microorganism. Death reigned supreme up until a first human appeared, and of course reigns supreme today. It wasn't some Adam and Eve creation. So in the beginning, there's no life really, and if there's no life, then there's no morals, and there's no purpose, and there's no God. That's evolution right there in a nutshell. And then somehow jump forward 4.5 billion years, 13, 14 billion years, we have life, amazing life. And human beings have some very strong morals now, surprisingly, and clear purpose in their what they need to be doing on the planet. But still, hey, no God. And this is a slow process. Obviously, 14 billion years, 4.5 billion years ago. This is slow. Change is slow per the theory. Has to be really. So I was at a crossroads. Really, what if the evidence clearly pointed to a natural explanation? What does that mean for you, Mrs. Christian? That means there's no worldwide flood. There's no Adam and Eve as first humans. There's thus no original sin. And I would say thus there's no need for Jesus. Jesus is now in the ranks of the unemployed. No 6 days of creation, and death reigns supreme well before any Adam, any first human ever occurred. If these are facts, they're not easily reconciled with Scripture. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So maybe you're a Christian straddler. You straddle the fence. You might say, well, I believe in the Bible and God and all that. But most scientists seem pretty certain on the matter. And they know a lot more than I do, and it's confusing. I guess God will explain to me when He's ready, when I'm ready, whatever. But I would say you got a problem. I would say your heart is not embracing everything. The heart can't embrace what the mind rejects. And is it any wonder or surprise that about 75% of evangelical Christians, I mean, I'm not talking about secular Christians or the ones that actually witness, who enter a secular college depart without faith. I've witnessed it firsthand in my own family. So I was at a crossroads. I was in a fit here, but I came to the decision. Hey, God, I'm going to look at the evidence. After all, I'm a Christian. I shouldn't be afraid of truth. And Jesus, you are the truth. You're supposed to set us free. So I said, okay, be what may, I'm looking. And still some people are going to say, hey, Tim, I'm a New Testament Christian. Moses did his best to document through Genesis what happened. And that was long before he ever was on the scene. Was he doing this documentation? He wasn't a scientist. He only wrote in general terms that folks back then could relate to. Well, I would say you still have a problem, because apparently some other key individuals were also confused about this matter. One person was named Jesus, because he said in Matthew 24, as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So for in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. They were up until the day Noah entered the ark. They were unaware until the flood came, swept them away, and so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So we see clearly Jesus knew his Genesis, particular 6 and 7, chapter 6 and 7. And he stated the flood was just as real as his second coming. Because according to Jesus, Noah, the ark, the flood that killed everything, they were as historically real as his second coming. Evolution completely rejects any flood story whatsoever. In terms of a global, gigantic, earth-shaking, uprising event, as the Bible describes it. So I would say as a Christian, you need to be familiar with the claims of evolution. It's not some innocuous theory that you can easily place within your own personal theory. Again, Jesus said in Matthew 19, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, the two shall become one flesh. Peter also apparently confused, talking about latter days. He said, they will say, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. And here's the catch. They say, for they deliberately overlook. What does that mean? They intentionally ignore this fact that the heavens existed long ago, earth was formed from water, through water, by the word of God, and that by means of these, the world that then existed was deluged, covered, swarmed with water and perished, clearly referring to the flood. He said people deliberately overlook the flood. That sounds like the day in spades. The psalmist, the Old Testament, clearly fooled in Psalms 104. He said the waters stood above the mountains. At your word, they fled. And later he says, you set a boundary that they might not pass, so that they might not cover the earth again. So there's a lot of Bible we have to deal with if we're going to accommodate everything evolution says. The world inundates you with messages. Yes, you should worry about it. We get one message from the TV, from science, that you evolved over hundreds of millions of years ago. You watch any nature show, and they'll relate the splendor of the animal kingdom in terms of evolution. You never hear about the creation, the wonders of God. Even the shows we watch, like Big Bang Theory, the name says it all, right? On the show, anyone holding a religious view, if you do, you're extremely ridiculed as ignorant. And in almost any TV show you watch, it's there. It's we're stupid. But maybe this ridicule is warranted. Maybe Christians are out of touch, or maybe the science behind the evidence is a bit more philosophy than science. I want to show you what I found out, and here's a spoiler alert. I'm still a Christian. So any questions, you guys just pop in, ask. Let's try to stay on topic here. There's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down, and we only got so much time. But we can talk later for sure. So before we examine evolution, let's look at how did life begin. I'm talking about this point right here. But first, and I'm sorry about this, we need some biochem. And I'm going to give you, someone's already said, I know nothing about this really. I'm going to give you some basic biochem that I boiled down to some of its simplest elements, because I know it's a complicated thing. But you already know you have DNA in every cell in your body. Okay, if you're a bacteria, you've got about 6 million pairs. I say pairs because there's only four chemicals that make up DNA, really. We call them A, G, C, T. And they're represented here by these colors. And here's this red thing here could be an A. If it is, that means this has to be a T, because it always binds A to T, T to A, C, G, G, C. So that's what we talk about base pairs. This is one base pair. Bacteria got 3 million, you got 3 billion in each cell. So you have this code. how does it get read? Well, when you need something, let's say you're drinking milk, you just drank some lactose, as you all know, and some people are lactose intolerant. That means you lack the enzyme, the gene lactase. And so your body says, I need to make it. So it says, okay, let's copy part of that DNA that makes that. It makes a short RNA strand. And so if it sees an A there, it puts an A. If it sees a G, it puts a G. It puts a C, 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 C. But when it sees a T, it puts a U there. It's different there. So there's only 4 letters that make up RNA. So it reads this and begins to make a protein, for example, lactase. And this protein, you know, it acts upon a chemical like lactose. Okay, so the simplest bacteria we can find has about 300 proteins. Most bacteria about 4,000. We humans, 20,000 proteins that do things. And a bacteria has, you know, not just 4,000 proteins, but 10,000 chemicals overall. It's a highly complicated thing. So that is the basic biochemistry you have to know. You have DNA. It makes a copy of that when it needs to do something, and it has to make a proteins are the workhorses of your body. They do all the action. This is just code for how to make that protein. The body is incredibly amazing and amazingly complicated. And I'm not even going to get into that part. And how do you make proteins? Well, proteins are made of only 20 different things, and we call those amino acids. Here are all 20, abbreviated. I only show you some of the chemical structure to show you that these things are complicated. They're not simple little things. They're complicated. And you need these complicated things to begin making proteins. And there's only 20 of these amino acids in our bodies. There's a tiny, tiny exception if you want to get technical. And so here's how it works. Your body begins to read this RNA. It sees a U, for example, and then a G and a G, and it knows by the code, hey, that's tryptophan. I'm going to go grab a tryptophan amino acid. I'm going to put it right here. Then it goes and it reads the next 3, and it goes and grabs that amino acid. And then it makes this, goes on and on and on, makes this long string of amino acids, all polymerized together in one long chain. So all 20,000 of your proteins are just basic combination of these 20 amino acids, and enable our body to do everything it needs to do. And then something amazing happens. This long chain begins to fold on itself based on its structure, based on its amino acids. You could get one chain starts folding, you get this tight little thing here. Here we have 2 different proteins come together to make one complicated protein. And this is kind of what it looks like. It's all bundled together and tight together. And so your body does that. And for example, back to our lactose example, you need lactase. Some of you out there are lactose intolerant. Here's some information for you. You are a mutant. Don't worry, as I'll explain later, we're all mutants. Every one of us have mutations in our bodies that our parents didn't have. I'll get into that later. But if you lost this ability, it's a problem. But all you did was you lost the ability to make this one protein well. And here's what happens after this, all this long chain folds on itself into some cute little structure like this. Lactose comes in, sets inside a predefined space, and then it's able to be cleaved into 2 sugars, glucose and galactose. Now your body can eat these things well. This is a simple protein. It has over 1,000 amino acids that make up its structure, and it does one job. It's amazing. 1,000. Keep that in mind, 1,000 amino acids. That'll play heavily into my next discussion. And then my professor said something else that was just crazy. He said, you know what? It's quite likely that a self-replicating protein was the genesis of life. You know, evolutionists struggled with how did life begin by itself, you know. And so what he was saying is this thing somehow popped up all by itself. Now, why did they not pick the DNA or the RNA as a beginning? Well, because that's a lot harder to do, because then you got to read it and make it, you know, it's easier to envision this thing happening first. And then that means evolution had to go backwards and make DNA to code for it. And then, of course, it went forward to make more proteins that work together and more chemicals and all that stuff, okay? This is a complicated question we're dealing with. So that was his theory. He just threw out there, as fact, actually more like fact, buy this. And it's a common thing today. Back here's '09, Jerry Coyne, one of the leaders in evolutionary thought. Life on Earth evolved gradually, beginning with one primitive species, perhaps a self-replicating molecule that lived more than 3.5 billion years ago. So, okay, we can go and actually test the odds of how could this happen? And what are the odds of this thing coming together and assembling by itself? So we're going to play a game. And we're going to play this game, even though, let's be clear, there's zero proof that this protein ever existed. Zero proof. But we're going to assume it did. And of course, then somehow this one component, had to become incredibly complicated into like a cell with 1,000 different components, our simplest cell. So let's pretend we have all the material needed to make this protein. It's just lying around in unlimited supply. So what are the odds that this self-replicating protein could come together correctly? We have to make some assumptions, okay? We're making this mythical protein. Let's make some assumptions. How much time do we allow? I say let's give it 30 billion years. The universe is only about 14 billion years old, we're told. The Earth, 5 billion. So 30, am I being generous? Extremely generous. And how big? Let's say 400 amino acids. I could make it smaller. It doesn't matter. It's small. There's no protein like this anyway out there. And this is a step based on a study NASA did of, how would we recognize life outside, the Earth if we ran into it? What if we saw this self-replicating protein? What would it look like? 1,000. You remember our lactose, our simple lactase enzyme? It's over 1,000. 1,000 would be a much better guess for something as complicated as something that could make itself, which doesn't exist in reality. Being generous. How fast can we make attempts at this? Well, how about we make 1 billion attempts to make this protein every second. That's generous. That's ridiculously fast. Nothing is like that. And let's give it all 20 amino acids, an unlimited supply. The reality is, if in some prebiotic Earth, there would be thousands of amino acid-like compounds and all kinds of funky structures that would interfere with this thing. So let's be generous and say there's only 20, and they're everywhere, and they're not reacting. They're just waiting to be selected. This doesn't happen very often. This doesn't happen. This is not reality. But I'm being generous. I am feeling extremely generous today, and today only. So we're going to play a game. We're going to take our 20 amino acids, put them in a hat, and make our chain, and we're going to pick them one by one. And like this, for example, I have a fictitious protein here. These are the first 10 amino acids you have to pick, and then you got to pick 390 more correctly without making a single mistake. I need a volunteer. Who wants to pick their hand into this hat here? I'm going to pick Phil. I love picking on Phil, of course. You don't mind, do you, Phil?
No, I'll try.
Yeah, okay. All right. Close your eyes, Phil. Come on, man. What would happen if you peeked and cheated when you selected Phil?
I'd still probably make a mistake.
You would, but you'd be adding some intelligence. We don't want any intelligence here, buddy. No intelligence allowed. It wouldn't be random anymore. Okay? You would be an intelligent agent at work, picking and choosing. That's not allowed, my friend. Okay? Forget about it. All right, here we go. You ready? Pick one.
Yep.
Oh, man, you picked phenylalanine, the first one. Good job. I mean, what are the odds are actually 1 in 20 and you picked the right one? I mean, there was like 19 chances out of 20 you'd pick the wrong one. So that's good.
Well, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing. And look, you did it again. You picked the right one. You got an alanine. And you got a glycine. You're on a roll, buddy. You are good. Oh, I'm sorry. Look at you. You picked the wrong one finally. and I'm sorry. You just made your first attempt, and now you got to make your second attempt. Okay, you got to start over. Okay.
Wow.
All right. Okay. You can imagine this is not going to be a fun thing for you to do. you really don't have enough time to complete this test
I,
because
I got a couple of million years.
we're going to see that might not be enough. So here's how you calculate the odds. They're quite simple. We have 20 amino acids that we can pick from. We have to pick 400 in the correct order, one at a time. So it's 20 times 20 times 20, 400 times. That equals the number 1 with 520 zeros. That's your odds
Wow.
that you can do that. So here's the number with 520 zeros. Now, do you see why we write things like this and not like this? Okay. So don't roll your eyes when you see this. Okay, I could have wrote this out for you every time. This is the number 1 with 520 zeros. This is I call it, it's a silly number. No, it's really more like a stupid number. There's nothing in the universe with this many things. You can't count anything. If you were to pull all the electrons off every atom in the universe, you would only have 10 to the 80. Go ahead and Google it. Electrons on a pinhead are 10 to the 13. That's 13 zeros. And that's just a small number compared to this number right here. It's a tiny number. Okay? This is a silly number. And here, what it looks like if I were to pull out, here's the 80 zeros of the electrons. And now I'm trying to give you an understanding of zeros here, so bear with me. Zeros matter. This is one universe electrons, our universe. It's everything you see and can imagine. What if I had 10 universes that I was going to go count? Okay, that would only be 10 to the 81, because 10 times 10 to the 80, you add a 1 here. You add one more 1 to this. I'm sorry, one more 0. So it's 10 to the 81 is 10 times bigger than 10 to the 80. Every time you add a 0, you get an incredibly big increase. I'm just trying to make you appreciate that. And if you already realize it, I apologize. And if you don't want to even begin to think about it, again, I apologize. So this is for the folks in the middle. Another example, let's say to Marlene tomorrow, and she knows I am a multi-billionaire, so she believes me. I say, tomorrow, I'm going to give you $1 billion tomorrow. Yeah, she might.
I'll take it.
She might be happy. And a billion is, it's 1 with 9 zeros. And would you agree that that's bigger than 100? I think most of you would say, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but this is only 10 to the 9. 1 with 9 zeros. It's bigger than 1 with 2 zeros. That's only 7 zeros. Okay, and then tomorrow comes, I say, Arlene, here's your $100. She said, what? You told me $1 billion. I said, what's it matter? It's just 7 zero difference. That's, if you think about the cosmos, that's not a difference. No. The zeros matter. 1 0 matters. 7 0 matters in our day-to-day life. Okay. She would probably be a little upset with me when I said, what's the difference? All right, let's go back to our problem. Phil already screwed up on the 4th try, which is pretty good. So let's talk about how many tries could we really do in 30 billion years at 1 billion tries per second? Well, the answer is 1 with 27 zeros. How do I get that? Well, you take 30 billion years, 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, blah, blah, blah. You get this number right here. That's the maximum number of tries you can do in 30 billion years, okay? That's it. You can't do any more. So you don't have all the time in the world. I've just given you all the time in the world plus some. And, 1 billion tries per second. But today, and only today, I am feeling extremely generous. I'm going to give you 30 trillion years, not 30 billion. I'm going to give you 1 trillion tries per second, not 1 billion. Here's the problem. I only add 6 zeros to that. Now it's 1 with 33 zeros. Okay, that's the maximum number of times you can try this. And the real problem is your odds of picking that one protein are so much bigger than the maximum number of tries you could possibly do. It's silly. You can't even begin to have enough time. Time is not on your side. I've given you 30 trillion years, not 15 billion like we're told. Okay? Your odds of being struck by lightning are 1 in 700,000. It's only 6 zeros. You're going to be fried. While you're picking these things, you're going to be fried to a crisp by lightning. That's going to happen. So you're dead meat even beginning. So, all right, one more example. I'm going to relate this to something we all can relate to. Powerball. And I bet 90% have played Powerball. I played Powerball. And you get 6 numbers. And for the most popular game, the actual odds are 1 in 300 million. Oh, by the way, you're 400 more times more likely to be struck by lightning than to win Powerball. So if you think you have a chance of winning at Powerball, you should be absolutely terrified of lightning and building a lightning shelter for you. Okay? That's how silly I think Powerball is to play, even with these odds. Yet I played. I know. Hey, if you don't play, you can't win. You would need to buy 300 million tickets, right, to guarantee you one winner. That's the guarantee. That's because there are 300 million possible combinations. Now, here's the problem with evolution. You need to buy one with 520 zeros tickets just to guarantee one correct protein. But you can only buy 10 to the 33 in 30 trillion years, okay? It's not going to happen. It's beyond ridiculous just to make one protein. And so if you get that down to what is my one chance? Well, it's one chance out of one with 487 zeros. How do I get that? Well, you just simply subtract 33 from 520. That's your odds to make one protein, one small protein that no one's ever known to exist. The simplest cell has 300 proteins plus 700 other things inside. It's more immensely complex. Evolution does require some faith to talk about this. And actually, here this is our one with 487 possibilities. Is this reasonable to assume this event actually occurred, again, randomly? Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish? This is the wisdom of the world right here, okay? This is the wisdom to create life. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds, animals, and creeping things. Our knowledge degrades, it de-evolves, it turns out. So when does faith become unreasonable? An evolutionist clearly has faith that this happened. Zero proof, zero ability to create a scientific experiment to show this, although they could do things, but no one ever does anything to show things could possibly happen randomly. Well, there's a few people who are actually starting to do that finally, but of course there's nothing to actually show this is possible. But at some point, faith degrades into sheer stupidity, right? You can think of something. Can anyone think of anything? Feel free to talk of how, I probably shouldn't believe in this anymore. Imagine, as a Christian, if all we had was like 2 sentences in our Bible, and every society, those things were everywhere. Would you still think it was special? Would you people not pity you? That poor soul, believes that. That's so silly.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tim, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you bring this kind of evidence, the weight of this kind of evidence to the professors, what is their answer?
I'm going to show you the reasoning in a minute, okay? Because I anticipated that question. Thank you. I got a slide for that. So for everybody, no matter what you believe, at some point, if you have faith that something happened, at some point, the evidence is so overwhelming against you, you're pitied. And let's look at the evolutionists. At some point, the evolutionists must have extreme doubt. This is my picture of an evolutionist with his idols. That they are free to take. These open-minded people take the sacred Christian symbol and they'll degrade it with feet on it. Open-mindedness. Plurality of ideas are welcome here, unless it happens to be God-centered. But really, the evolutionists, their faith system rests on pure faith. I mean, their belief system is resting on pure faith, as I'm going to show you even more. Um, so speaking of stupidity, let's go back to our lottery. Let's play Powerball. People play Powerball, right? Of course they play it, even though the odds are overwhelmingly against it. These are actually the actual odds: 292,201,338 to 1. So it's almost 300 million. So I call it. Let's do things simple here. So everybody in the U.S. buys a ticket. Then you are guaranteed one winner and possibly two winners because there's more than 300 million. So that's how that works. But when you, let's say, I know there's someone on this call, you buy a ticket and you think every week I've got a chance to win, and this is true. But at some point, you're going to refuse to play Powerball because the odds are just stupid. Where is that point for you? Clearly, it's not currently because you still play. You think, okay, I got a decent chance, even though you really don't. Let's say we add one more ball to Powerball. Here it is. Your odds have just went up to 3 billion to 1. Half the planet has to play Powerball to guarantee one winner, and there's 7.8 billion people right now. I just Googled that. Half the people have to play. So your odds just got crazy more difficult. Let's say we add another ball, and now it's 28 billion. We would have to have 3.6 Earths of people. Everyone buys a ticket and plays. Don't you realize your odds are just dwindled to horrible, horrible odds? Are you still going to play Powerball? Someone's going to say, yes, I still have a chance. Yes, you do. When would the biggest knucklehead stop playing Powerball? Would it be 10 populations of Earths? Is that when you say, this $2, I'm better off just wadding it up and throwing it away? You're better off buying a penny stock, and that stock takes off. You have a much, much better odds, okay? And so at some point, you have to refuse. You have to think, this is stupid. I'm going to quit. I have no chance because the chances are so tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay. Yet our protein would require so many more Earths, okay? So let's say the knucklehead stops playing Powerball at 10 Earths. They finally realize, 78 billion tickets, possibilities, it's too much. Your odds of making this protein randomly are this many Earths. Not 10 Earths, but that many Earths. One with 475 0 Earths. And I made a picture of what that looks like on one slide of all these Earths right here, okay? This is my artist rendition, okay, of that. I know you're laughing like crazy, but that's what it looks like. If you want me to send you a picture of this, let me know, and I will do that. So this mythical protein could not have formed. It does not now exist, and there's no clue that it ever existed. There's no clue that any other self-replicating molecule of any type has ever existed. And even if such a molecule did arise, it's still not life. The next crazy math problem is much worse. And don't worry, I'm not going to go there. In our protein, you have to find 300 unique parts, proteins, bring them all together inside one complex part called the cell membrane, and then make them all work together at once in unison, as each cell in your body does now, okay? That's the next problem. It gets harder for the next problem. Okay, Phil, to your question, how could anyone possibly think this could happen randomly? Okay, here's their logic. The pure doubter says this: Tim, there's no God, period. Okay, buddy, there's no God. And this is how most scientists define scientists. From the get-go, we're not going to consider the existence of an external mind. Forget it. That's not science. Okay. But they say, we exist. I exist. Okay. Therefore, my existence had to happen randomly. Therefore, those odds that I just proposed that are ridiculous, wow, they happened. That's amazing. That's their faith. And besides, give it enough time, Anything can happen. That is the mantra of evolutionists. Given enough time. I mean, 14, 15 billion years, that boggles the mind. Because we only live for 80, then we die. Right? Maybe 100. Okay. What's it matter? 20 years, who cares? It's a speck. It's a speck. So they really, deep down, they say, give it enough time, anything could happen. That's what they're holding on to. But I just gave you evolutionists all the time in the world, plus some, plus crazy repetition, 1 billion times per second. That's their faith. And they cling to it with a passion. Is this a battle of logic? No, this is not an argument about logic or common sense. This is purely a spiritual battle about belief systems. That is why logical arguments are ineffective. When they see this video, it is essentially ineffective. Don't be surprised, 2 Corinthians 4. Paul said, in their case, the God of this world has blinded their minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. And so this doesn't, I used to be shocked. How can you not see this? The Bible tells me clearly why they can't see it. The God of this world. Now, with apologies to share, if I could turn back time, what would I do to my professor? What would I say if I had this information? I could say, and I have some good normal sarcasm, Professor, I am very impressed, Professor. I see you are a man of extreme faith. I am a mere Christian, commanded to live by faith, but your faith puts mine to shame, okay, to shame, and I'm supposed to live by faith. I got a little video here I want to share. Talks about the next steps, of evolution, essentially, where would it go? And so let me pull that up here, and I'm going to share my computer sound. That's on. Let's go to it. If it doesn't work out good, it's only 3 minutes, so hang in there, okay?
6 million times. That's how long it would take for chance to build one functional protein.
Now, suppose against all odds, chemical evolution produced our single functional protein. Would we have life? No. We'd have one protein, just a lifeless arrangement of amino acids. The simplest living cell we know has more than 300 different proteins. But proteins are only part of the story when you consider any actual cell. Remember, you're going to have carbohydrates, complex sugars, nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, lipids, a whole variety of different chemicals which jointly constitute the living state. Those bits and pieces all have to be brought into the same microenvironment at the same moment in time.
Each chemical building block must then be assembled and organized into the network of molecular machines that will control every facet of life.
If we can appreciate exactly how hard it is to produce one molecular machine using nothing except atoms and energy, we can see that there's a profound problem, because once you have one molecular machine, you don't have a living thing. These molecular machines need other molecular machines. And even if nature was capable of producing all the molecular machines necessary, that still wouldn't be enough. They have to all be together, all in this tiny little membrane-bound space that we call a cell.
From my understanding of what it takes to make a cell, it has to happen all at once. You can't do it one bit at a time, because everything works together in a causal loop. The higher level of organization transcends the pieces. The spatial organization in the cell requires that molecules end up in the right place at the right time. The DNA is copied into RNA. The polymerase that does the copying has to find the right spot in the DNA to start copying. The RNA has to somehow hook up with ribosomes, which have to be in a particular place, and the proteins then that are made have to be going to a particular place. That's an awful lot to account for by random chance.
The probability that you would get them in the same space at the same time becomes beyond unimaginable. And the probability that you would get them within a membrane enclosure, like a cell, is the next best thing to impossible.
All right, you guys back?
Yep,
Yep,
we've
we're here.
got
Excellent.
No, we,
Excellent. So that's it for today. So how did life start? What's more reasonable? Spontaneous generation of a complex thing, or a God who has no beginning and no ending? You already knew belief in God requires faith, right? Now you see other theories are not so much rooted in science as they are in faith. You know, next week, we're going to start by giving the evolutionists the benefit of the doubt. Okay, let's say life happened somehow. Hey, you know, maybe God kickstarted simple life and then he let evolution do its thing, right? But could it really evolve and increase in complexity in a random manner? Next week, we're going to look at common perceptions like, but here's the perception. It is clear the fossils reveal a gradual complexity of life through time. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
And also, but what we're going to see is it wasn't gradual. From leading paleontologists, not Christian paleontologists, but folks who hold tightly to evolutionary theory, they say it wasn't gradual. There's like an explosion of life that happens. And we also hear that fossils reveal all animals, including you have a clear line of descent from lower animals. And we'll quote one particular paleontologist at the British National Museum of History, the most foremost museum. He said, you know, I wish I had a good example to show you. Does that sound like a clear line of descent? But all right, people, here's my mantra: keep the faith, but let's be reasonable about it, okay? Okay, anybody got any questions at this point? Any comments?
Yeah, where does the information come from?
Oh, that is the crux of the question, buddy. Can you have information without an information giver? That's the crux. And many scientists have been led back to faith when they realize each cell contains more information than any supercomputer imaginable. The information that's there, it's only 4 billion pairs, which sounds like 3 billion sounds like a lot. Only 4 chemicals that code. Okay, no, we have 26 letters in our alphabet to code our words, right? Only 4 letters of the genetic alphabet for a code. It's crazy. That code makes it come together. It's crazy.
I haven't visited him in a long time.
And I hear somebody talking.
That's Jaden.
That's a good question, Phil. That's the crux. Information that is what stumps a lot of people, a lot of evolutionists. How did it get started? Because once you get started, you know, you can propose other theories of how it got more complex, how information might have built upon itself. But that initial code, that initial kickstart, that flash of lightning, wow. That's what gets glossed over, you know, in science, in that classroom, that is not freely admitted. They speak with such confidence, but you dig a little bit, and you realize, okay, maybe they're not so smart. Any other questions?
Well,
Yes,
Tim, you
did you?
back to a little bit of trauma in 1978 when I had to get through biochemistry.
Yeah. Yep, you're like a lone person on an island, huh? In that classroom.
Well, it was funny
Did you have-
because would write the Krebs cycle on a bed sheet and put it above our bed at night to stare at it. So
Oh, okay. You're having thoughts back to the enormous memorization you had to do. Learn all 20 amino acids and their structure. Oh
yeah,
my
how
goodness.
they connected.
And memorize the Krebs cycle. Oh, yeah. Hey, I gave you the short version, didn't I, today?
Yep.
I thought I heard Esther.
Did you ever had the problem in your life as a scientist that you really doubt your faith in God, that you thought, oh, I'm losing it?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I even pause from time to time and I'm thinking, this is, well, actually, in a lot of ways, it might have happened, but in a lot of ways, this recenters me, okay? And I think about the world's problems and my own problems, and then I think, wow, this thing that I'm actually alive. Each cell is so immensely complex. It had to have an intelligent creator, okay? It had to have had.
Amen. I agree on that one.
That often recenters me. I used to fear that this whole knowledge base was going to pull me away from my faith because, after all, it was proven scientists I read in my book. And then you realize even the scientists are at each other's throats about what's actually real. And many of them admit, they would say, gee, I wish we actually had some evidence to support this. I mean, they would actually say that. They don't say it much anymore because people like me come along and quote them. And their peers will say, you idiot, you're giving the Christians ammunition, shut up. And you realize this is not a logical argument we're doing. This is a philosophy at its core. And scientists are just human philosophers. We all bring in our bias into everything we do. That's our lens that we look through. I am biased towards a creator. They're biased towards a non-creator. So we look at things through that lens, and we have to be careful. And you have to kind of deconstruct that as much as you can, especially to be a good scientist.
I think the amazing part is that when you do all these, that you have to create all these bacteria and stuff for diseases and things, antibacterial things.
Yeah.
I think when you sit there and you had to do those things and God gives you the wisdom and the knowledge that came from God, that put these things for you together and set you there, that's it. That's what you had to do. I think for yourself as a child of God, it gives you so much victory, so much joy of the Creator teaching you about His creation, how to put these things together.
Yes, exactly. There, especially if you look at, there's some people who were doing the early realization that our universe is expanding. It really is. And people like Hubble, and a lot of them realized if it's actually expanding and you backtrack, that means it had a beginning. It started somewhere. And that's and a lot of them were always thinking the universe always existed as is, matter existed as is, but then they realize, wait a minute, this thing tracks back to a singularity, a beginning. And if there's a beginning, then there's a cause, because the logic goes, everything that exists has a beginning. And they realize, hey, the universe came into existence. Therefore, the universe had a cause, a beginning. Something outside of the universe caused it. And they realized where their logic was leading them back to that realization, oh, wait a minute. And some of them actually became Christians, strong Christians, realizing I was chasing the wrong thing. There's a lot of stories about in the 40s and 50s as people were realizing this. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Hey, Tim, said that this was recorded. Will we be able to share this with others?
Yeah, please.
My next step is to learn YouTube, and I'll put it on YouTube, and I will send out the link to that.
Thank you.
I've already mastered Zoom, I thought, but not really. I still made some mistakes today. But yes, it'd be great. My burden is to people who are Christians who get attacked by this. You know, you're attacked and you don't even know it. Like I said, watch a nature show, watch a regular TV show. This scientists, too many of them present this as an unassailable fact. To question it is to question science itself. And it's a smokescreen. It makes me angry. And I see Christians retreating, abandoning the faith because of this. And that riles me somewhat. So please share it when I send it out. Please share it. And I tell you, I'll get some comments. I'll get some feedback that tell you, Tim, you are an absolute idiot beyond idiot beyond idiot. It gets so personal. You read some of these comments on some of these YouTube videos, people, it's nasty. And hey, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, right? Jesus said, hey, they're not going to like you. Let me tell you, they're not going to like you. And it's a spiritual battle. And all I could remember, this is spiritual. It's not about logic. Then it makes sense to me what's happening.
Tim, I've got a question for you. You seem to draw a pretty very thick, very black and white line in the sand between someone who's of faith and someone who accepts evolutionary theory and things like that. Is there any, in your mind, room for middle ground? Someone who can be of faith, someone who can see God working through natural processes, natural sciences,
right?
And basically what I'm saying is I personally see there's a difference between me looking at evolution from a purely naturalistic worldview, saying that there's no place for God in anything, but then also looking but then also kind of basically allowing there to be room for God to be able to allow these
increased complexity, right, through natural processes, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that is a very common thing. And once we get past this, a lot of Christians get past this problem by saying, yeah, God kick-started it. That's one of my points there. But then they say, well, I can see evolution coming along and doing its thing, taking simple life, making it more complex. And some Christians would say, I see God being involved in all that. Wherever I see, extreme difficulty, well, I see, well, God jumped in and moved his hand and kick-started it along the way. We're gonna look at that. We're gonna see what is there in the fossil record, what should be there, what's not there, what scientists think about that. We're going to look at, is it possible statistically for mutations to happen quick enough in the right spots to bring about complexity and get selected, get spread to the species, and reestablish a new norm. I tell people I believe in evolution. I really do. What does that mean, though? That means mutations happen. We are all mutants. Sometimes that mutation might incur an advantage. And I think but it's only within the species, is my belief. And within that species, let's say a dog can smell better, okay, because of one mutation. Okay, well, that dog now has an advantage, and it's more likely his offspring will breed more than the other dog, so he's going to establish himself more around him. That's a change. Evolution selected it. I believe in natural selection. That's obvious. We see that. A child born with a birth defect, a bad one, is not going to reproduce. That is natural selection. That's negative selection. It happens everywhere. Anytime something bad happens, you get selected out of the herd, so to speak. So we're going to look at those questions, Joe. Okay, hang on, buddy.
Okay.
Hey, Tim, can I just respond to that a little bit?
Sure.
I think that there's a difference when you're talking about evolution as a means of creation, and then the process of adaptation. And so, I believe more in the biblical account of creation, but there definitely is a process of adaptation that has occurred through millennia. And that is just a constant thing that happens in life. We have to adapt to the changing environment, to society, and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little footnote.
Yep, we're gonna tackle it, Joe. Next week we talk about what the fossils say, basically. How do evolutionists interpret the fossil record?
All righty.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Tim, thank you very much. And you just reminded me of a book that a mentor put in my hand many, many, many years ago. It's called Darwin's Black Box. I just looked on my bookshelf and I put my hand right on it. There it is, Darwin's Black Box.
I would never read
You got it too, yes. I read this book years and years ago. It makes an overwhelming case against Darwin on the biochemical level. Thank you for reminding me. I might just, yes.
Here's the next book that, Joe, you're going to love. Begins to look at, okay, we know there's mutations. We know it happens. But just how much constructive power does it really have? And this is information we've learned in the past 10 years with the onset of massive sequencing that we can do of everyone's DNA. We can track the genetic changes and see what happens how far can evolution go? What's its power to create? In the past 10 years, we have such a much better understanding. And I can tell you now, there's some serious evolutionists who have dropped evolution as a theory. They're not Christians. They're not believing in any God. They're just saying, you know what? Evolution ain't cutting it for me anymore. Okay, so hang on, guys. There's a lot to talk about. Exciting. And it's all new. This is new stuff I'm going to get into. Imagine the poor souls back in the 50s and 40s getting bombarded by being stupid idiots, and in the 90s like me. And now we got new evidence. We're going to look at the new evidence, guys.
Amen.
Yay.
Hallelujah. Thank you very much, Tim. This is very exciting. You've got me all on the edge of my seat. I can't wait for next Sunday.
Me too.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Same bat time, same bat station.
Yep.
Yes. Miss, who did the Lord put in my mind right now? I just left my mind.